Welcome, everybody. We are so excited that you chose to join us. We greatly appreciate you investing your time in this session. My name is Marquita Gillespie. I am the Executive Director of the NIGP Consulting Program with NIGP. And I'm really excited about this session. I am a data nerd. I'm very passionate about data, as are my colleagues joining me here today. And I want to start off by asking them to introduce themselves because I like everybody to hear their voice and face. So we'll start with Al. Al.
Yes, and hey, an IGP Forum, it's so good to be here with really what I consider one of the most esteemed panels in our community. Marquita, as you all know, for me, and for many, she is actually the queen of procurement. She practically knows everyone and also knows the industry like the back of her hand. And to her point, is data and nerdship. Actually, those two do combine, but do combine for folks who hopefully want to be empowered and to drive results. Like those are key things that are going to come across in the talks today. And I'm going to let Chris and Damien introduce themselves. But by way of introduction, on my side, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Civic Marketplace. We work with local governments to modernize procurement, making it faster, more transparent, and data-driven. And what I've seen firsthand across my career is that agencies and entities are not lacking in data. They're actually probably drowning in it. And the real challenge is turning that data into decisions that actually move procurement forward. And today we're going to talk about how we bridge that gap and how we go from insight to actions. Chris, over to you. And Chris may be frozen, so we're going to go to Damien.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Al. Yes, my name is Damien Espinosa. For those of you that joined the session, we had a session yesterday with Al as well. I've been with the city of Brownsville now going for 6 years. I've been with the procurement department this whole time. And, Al absolutely nailed it right there about the information. Sometimes it's not the lack of, it's the amount of information that we have. And it's sometimes difficult to be able to translate that into something that it's a narrative story for everybody to see how we, at procurement department or as a city as a whole, we work on. So we're excited to showcase this and hopefully show the people how we can innovate and show that data for them to use as well. And I see that Chris is back. So Chris, I think that I'll turn it over to you so you can do the introduction.
Chris, over to you. Can you hear us? Chris may be having connection issues, and we'll get back to him shortly once his connection is back. And so we wanted to start off with a poll. Charles is going to help us run this poll. Marquita, over to you.
Yeah, while we're sharing this poll, I just want to set some expectations for the session. This is an advanced session, and so we assume that you are here because you have interest in data and you already appreciate the value and the importance of data in how you are using it in your government operations. So if you need more background in data, I welcome you to and encourage you to go to the best practices on the NIGP website, and certainly invite you to reach out to all of us, especially Al and I, and happy to have a more foundational conversation with you at that level. But here, we're really going to be talking about that deeper dive that Al alluded to, talking about actual applications and systems and successes and failures so that you get something more definitive and tangible that you can take back with you. So also kind of looking at where AI is going to be taking us in the future with data. So as Al said, looking at taking what might look really pretty on your dashboards and the data you might have access to, but making sure that you're taking actions with those that are going to increase your value and your level of service within your community. So, Al, now that we've given everybody a little bit of time, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing with the poll?
Yeah, so majority, not surprising, from procurement, right? As in 72 out of 70 are in the procurement function. We have a few folks out in IT and also at the executive and leadership side. And for us, like, as in on the roles is where data is so important, and we're going to learn from Chris and Damien today. Is that, as my son says, teamwork is the dream work. Is like, how do you align people around data, around North Stars? And so that's probably one of the takeaways that we're going to come across. But that for us is super helpful on where everyone is in terms of function, and then in terms of fluency. As an advanced class, it looks like the majority is at the advanced and the intermediate, which is of course, for us helpful to test the pulse of the audience. And we're excited for this session to be interactive. So please don't be shy to put in your questions, especially as we drill down into the different case studies. Why we brought practitioners who really on the field, they're living the work that also you are doing every day in, day out, is because we heard last year about the importance of people love the theory, but how do they translate the theory into practice? And that's where hopefully Chris and Damien, we're gonna facilitate some interesting discussions.
Great. And thank you, everybody, for engaging in that poll. And to reiterate what Charles said earlier, please share your questions and your comments in chat. You know, you're pros at this now on day 3 with VCon, that it also always adds greater flavor to the conversation when you're engaged and you're posing questions as you hear our panel share their experiences. So we want to hear from you. And since we're in a platform that allows you to jump off mic, please don't hesitate to jump in and share a question, or at least share it in the chat as we move along. So let's set a little bit of a foundation. Why is data analytics so important? And especially, why is it so important right now? I'm talking to a group of, obviously, primarily procurement professionals. So you know the fishbowl that you live in. You already experienced that scrutiny, not only of procurement, but just public sector in general. And so as we think about our stakeholders, we know they have expectations of us. Our taxpayers, our citizens in the community expect transparency. Our leaders expect us to have information, to provide them information, and to be efficient and effective in our roles supporting the organization. Our supplier community, our largest stakeholder group, they want opportunity and they want fairness. And so we're doing our best in procurement to serve all those stakeholders and doing it in a manner that balances compliance with exceptional service. So this is the reality of the world that you live in. And we're not suggesting that data is the magic solution to fix everything that you're dealing with it, but it is certainly critical to driving your value, the value of how you make informed decisions as an organization, and strive for those savings and efficiencies that you're expected to provide and deliver. And it's also foundational to your roles being in risk management and compliance, and also really focusing on those values of public sector procurement of transparency and accountability. So our first question, I think we have for you as an audience, and please, 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 please jump in here and give us your thoughts. As you think about your entity, what is particularly challenging for your entity today when it comes to accessing and analyzing the data that you wish you could get to in your organization? What are those barriers? What are those hurdles that you experience? And thank you, Ross, starting right off with a response. Data is fragmented. Thank you, Brooke. Clean and organized. Dorothea, too many platforms. Absolutely. Getting to good data. Fragmented. Reliable. Thank you, Ross. Just getting access, period. Beth, I hear you. I hear you. Lack of reports. Excellent. I mean, these are the same things I was experiencing when I was in Tucson. I knew I needed data to make decisions, but that data was in so many places and it was not consistent. So I definitely see that that is resonating as some common challenges. So thank you and keep sharing because our panel likes to hear about what your world is like. And while you're continuing to share, Al, you want to take us to some framework overview?
Yes, absolutely. And back to Marquita's earlier points in terms of the importance of data. And sometimes I think about this as like, we are what we measure. Even thinking about, funnily enough, Einstein's like theory of relativity, right? Like if we were to nerd out, it's when you look at something, it changes. And that's how we also look about at data is when you define what you're going after, you need those KPIs. And for us, even before thinking about the types of analytics and procurement, think about the moral purpose of your work. So in procurement, what outcomes do you want to achieve? And then reverse engineer the KPIs to go into different types of analytics, such as descriptive, which is what happened, and when did it happen, and diagnostic, why did it happen? There's analysis such as root cause or fraud detection. We're seeing increasingly sophisticated tools based on machine learning and AI that can pick things up from a lot of different data sets. And then what entities have classically not been doing enough of, potentially, we're going to hear from Chris and Damien about how they're utilizing more predictive and prescriptive analytics. And to Marquita's earlier point, where we think about data is you collect the data and there's always a challenge of collection. And today we're going to drill down into some examples of how do you in a way get over the hurdles of collection to translate insights into action. So using prediction, prescription, and then really driving hopefully value for not just your function, but for all your stakeholders. And when we think about data, we go back to, again, Marquita's example. And for us, I see Marquita as a leader in the profession because data is central to her work. And in a way, it is empowering for every procurement professional to look at data as a tool to empower their conversations. And we're going to speak to Damien and Chris, who are going to take us through some exciting examples of that. And when we think about the procurement analytics lifecycle, again, today we're going to, especially with the city of Pittsburgh, talk about how they collected, cleaned, prepared, and then did the analysis and modeling, which goes back to translating insights into actions once they're interpreted and reported. And think about this as a loop. You got to start somewhere. And we see a lot of folks in the profession not wanting to start because of some of the problems that we see are in the conversation here. There's no database. There's too many tools, not having enough fields. There's politics in the data. And for us, in a way, those challenges are a motley. And it sounds actually like a minefield, but with courage. And I think that goes back to the culture that we are going to also speak to Damien and Chris about, is the culture, in a way, of not just change management, of starting small and using a team to align around even simple KPIs, simple sets that can really drive results. So we're excited to take you through a few examples. Marquita, over to you before we hand it over to Chris. Yes.
I want to ask you, Al, and I also welcome Damien and Chris responding to it, but just real quickly, as people are hearing you walk through those past two slides, is there a good starting point for them to get an understanding of how their organization views data? I mean, should this be a talking point with someone in procurement, with maybe someone in their city manager's office or their IT department? How do they get a sense of where they are as an organization relative to what you just went through?
And Marquita, you're going to hate me for saying this. It is that classic. It depends on the entity, right? We see larger entities need a lot more cross-functional work, a lot more conversations across different teams to come up even with a data model or a data standard. That imagine for a one-person shop, sometimes we know that there are city administrators who double up as procurement professionals, who double up as their finance team, and they can put together an Excel spreadsheet and define their data model of exactly what contracts they're going to use, what the nomenclature, and if they want to do NIGP code and code in terms of categorization for those contracts. So I would say with added size, there is complexity, but not to shirk away from the importance of human relationships. Because when people lead with data or technology, there is naturally fear and uncertainty because we're not leading with animate, in a way, human connection. And so what we'll hopefully hear from Chris and Damien is more about the people change management, especially as organizations become more complex and increase in size, and how to really adopt good practices in those organizations.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Chris and Damien. So, Chris, let's talk about the Pittsburgh story. Tell us about your use case with data.
Yeah, and thanks, Marquita, and thanks, Al, for teeing me up. This is and thanks to all the attendees for coming and listening to all our stories, and including ours. I'm sorry I ran into a technical issue when it was intro time, but I'm Chris Belasco. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the City of Pittsburgh, and I'm very good friends with our folks in our procurement office. And so it's very nice to be at an NIGP event for those reasons, right? Because I like to tell data stories because our procurement nerds are also data nerds. And it's something that we share a passion for. And like many of you, sometimes we share a frustration for. So what happened in Pittsburgh a few years ago is that we sort of realigned some of our strategic goals around trying to kind of accomplish the goal of worker safety. And so this story and what Al and Marquita are talking about here that's really important to emphasize is that people have to figure out where to start, and they can't start anywhere place other than where they are, right? And that's okay in different places, right? And we started at a place where it was kind of a humble beginning for our safety initiative. And wait, if you're wondering why I'm talking to you about safety, by the end of this story, by the end of our conversation with Marquita, we'll actually be telling a procurement story. So don't fret yet, right? Mm-hmm. So along the way, while we were starting our journey of safety, our risk management teams, our process improvement teams, and our HR teams wanted to get a better handle on worker safety incidents. Governments are not required to report incident rates to the federal government's, to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So they're not required to report a DART rate that many of you who may have come over from private industry may have had to report in your organizations in the past, right? DART stands for Days Away, Restricted, and Transferred. And what it really means is when there's a serious enough worker injury, right, or an incident that takes place that results in a serious enough worker injury where somebody can't come back to work in the same shape that they were in when they came that day. And so one of the things we wanted to prioritize was the calculation and the communication of the city's DART rate, which is sort of a number saying, how many incidents per 100 people are occurring in the city of Pittsburgh. And so we wanted to visualize that data and have folks in different departments be able to see it so that they could make decisions to find out if they were improving worker safety. And what we wanted to do was open up the space to talk about why the incidents were happening and what kind of information that management could get from workers to find out, right, what the solutions to the safety incidents were, because they were in the work every day, okay? And so after we sort of started to implement this and we drove towards safety, we saw a 50% reduction in these safety incidents in the department where we launched the work. And that was like a huge amount of change in a reasonable amount of time. It wasn't right away. It took some time for this to trickle out, but it was a rather quick change for the speed of government sometimes. But I want to tell you a little bit about how we got there. So the way that we did this work is we had brought in some consultants to coach us on this work, and they came in using some Toyota-based leadership principles. And so offline, you could go to these free materials that the company Toyota makes available on how to manage an organization effectively. And so what they did is they came in and they worked with us on a regular basis, coaching us towards sort of how to facilitate this work internal to the city. And so the idea for starting with safety actually ends in working on other problems. So where we're talking about safety today, what we wanted to do was open up a gateway for our employees, our frontline workers, to say, there's a problem that we need to solve. We could follow what we did about our safety protocol to get to the root cause of whatever it is and figure out how to solve there, right? To solve whatever that problem is too. So our safety thinking ended up reflecting our efforts at root cause problem solving that we wanted to bring over into the rest of kind of city government operations. And so the place that actually started was a local company of the city of Pittsburgh. They're called Alcoa. You may have heard of them. And so that actually ended up bringing in some of their thought into the work that we were doing. And safety was like the entry point, right? Because the way that we looked at this is, you and I may see how we do our work differently. We may see the prioritization differently, but that could be on any problem that we want to solve. But you and I are actually ultimately going to agree that the thing that we want to do that kind of prioritizes over anything else is safety, right? Everybody wants to make sure that they and their coworkers all come home the way that they showed up that day, right? And so that was a value that we could all agree on. So we started problem solving at safety, and we knew that we needed psychological safety to get to that point. And so what we did is we also created psychological safety. As we worked in our Department of Public Works, we met with every level of leadership. We had mixed meetings with different kinds of leaders in every level. We talked to them about how we would value their input into safety, and we asked how we could get their frontline staff input into how to make it safer for their employees to be at work, right? And for those frontline workers to share with us. And it took some thinking and some expressions of frustration. But what we actually needed the data, right? So this is fragmented data. We needed the data that was in the eyes and the ears of the employees. And we needed that to end up in the hands of people who could make resources available to solve their problems.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I really like hearing about creating that culture of trust, right, Chris, and getting the buy-in, because I think probably everybody on this webinar right now probably appreciates the efforts that have failed in their organization because there was not that trust, there wasn't a common goal, they weren't made to feel part of it. So I think creating that environment is so critical to individuals buying in and seeing themselves as part of the solution. So I love that part of your story. So impactful. Can you elaborate on the specific tools? Like how did you build this, Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and if you're viewing the slides rather than the chat room right now, you could see 3 different little examples that are, they're all teeny tiny on your screen, but they're different tools that we built inside the city of Pittsburgh, right? And so we didn't even start there. When Al says start where you are, a lot of the work that we've been working on with our Department of Public Works for the last few years has been to try to digitize some of the work processes that they do, meaning that they started on paper and so did we, right? And so if there was an incident that we wanted to record, right, for the safety system that we were sharing out, we made it accessible to all of the Department of Public Works leaders at every level to start out on paper. And then we took all the elements that we were capturing on this piece of paper, and we brought them over into Microsoft Forms. And we wrote a form that mimicked all of the different pieces of information that we were trying to capture about the incident, what happened, whether anybody was injured, so some other things that are actually even follow-ups onto that. And so that Microsoft form then went into Microsoft 365. It went over into Power Automate, and then we actually wrote it over into Google Cloud Platform, which was kind of the technical wizardry that my team can bring. But as far as the other pieces of this are concerned, there are things that a lot of people on this call probably already do or may already know how to do. And so we actually also then, to calculate DART, and you're looking at a year-on-year DART down below, or on the upper left of that little tiny box with all my pictures in it, right? And you can see that there was a nice size change between 2022 and 2023 on there. If you zoom in, a lot, forgive me. DART was calculated by taking the incidents that are serious enough for this, right? The OSHA recordable incidents, and comparing them against the amount of hours worked in a given month, quarter, year, however you're calculating it. And so my team, which consists of some data engineers too, pulled the timekeeping data out of Dayforce, and then we used that. We calculated it according to the formula that's on every state's occupational safety administration. And it gave us the denominator to compare against the number of incidents. And so then we began to communicate and share in leadership meetings, what was happening with this DART rate. And so that was also something that happened both in the senior leadership level and then at the department level. And then, of course, our team was looking at it at a regular basis. And when we initiated this and throughout the work, we continued to share the incidents, which is what you're seeing, like a version of incident reporting in the lower part of that little box, and the DART rate with the mayor on a regular basis. And so we ultimately built all of our visualizations using Google Cloud products, including Looker Studio. And so it was a single page that we were trying to get all this information down onto to help make it simple for people to see, whether it's the incident, what was happening with the incident, whether it was the DART rate, what a summary DART rate looked like.
And such excellent work in terms of exactly what we're, here in terms of the key takeaways that Chris and his team and the city aligned around metrics that matter to them. And they created this culture of psychological safety where, in a way, no one was afraid of the data. And they also married it back to that life cycle of data analytics, the routines, which really are the engine of delivery, where Chris talked about those conversations that happened on a human level. It didn't happen at the data level, but they happened at the human level of, as in how can we come together to align around and build this out. And so for us, that is such a great, in a way, not just case study, but it's just amazing to see that work, that it has been so impactful. And Chris, would love to hear from you how, exactly to your earlier point, you spread that across different functions, including purchasing, and the impact of, that some of that work had on the procurement profession. Because I know exactly what you talked about is procurement and data are best buds in Pittsburgh, which for us is an exemplary example of the functions.
Absolutely, and thank you. So one of the things that this did was it opened up the ability for us to communicate around other problems that other teams were having in the city. And so while I work in the IT department, and there is certainly an occasional injury that could lead to reporting of DART, what we wanted to do was export this idea of problem solving into a model, right, that could be practiced by all the managers and leaders in the IT department in a way that maybe our safety incidents, we weren't, encountering as many, but we were certainly encountering problems. Everybody in IT is dealing with problems all the time. And so one of the things that I did with my team then was to introduce in our, weekly planning meeting, and standing meeting, was to surface any problems that were occurring, record them, try to practice some of these same communication techniques, try to ask the question why over and over again. Let's do this 5 whys analysis to try to figure out what a problem was happening. Well, it turned out one thing that we were doing is we were retrieving data from our human resources system, right, is that we were encountering times when the data would break. something would happen in the data that would cause a problem, and it would break a dashboard that we were reporting to senior levels of government. And so we said that's a problem, and we realized that what it was we had data governance processes, but we had a data governance problem. And so it led to us developing a scope of work that hasn't yet hit the street for a data governance solution, right? And so we worked with procurement to take the problem that we had encountered, build language into our RFP that defined the problem that we were trying to solve, and then build that into the scope of work for the solution that we wanted to procure. And that whole thing traces back to trying to build the culture of safety for people to say, why do we have problems? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And in this case, what could we do to request a solution from vendors? And so, like I said, we haven't yet hit the street with that. But when I did that work, I actually brought a lot of the kind of business case information that I typed out in paragraph form with some training materials from one of our partners that provides training for us on how to use procurement. And they said, look out for this, look out for that, look out for the other thing. They're called Partners for Public Good. I think they may work with a handful of you too, right? And I combined the information in our business case information with the training materials. I said, give me a first draft of this in Copilot. And it gave us something to look at that identified a handful of their best practices. We refined that document from there, and it saved us a lot of the effort of kind of starting from scratch. I'm not a good procurement scope of work writer, but I didn't need to be,
Well,
so this was a way of marrying a bunch of technology together.
And part of this theory of change that we've seen with you at Pittsburgh, from procurement to data to the finance function as well, we do see you as a great innovation example, is that modality of being problem first, right? As in, what is the challenge that you're trying to address and aligning around that? And we also see that with now challenge-based RFPs, outcome-based procurement. Marquita, over to you to tease that out and help us with some of the reflections.
Yeah, Chris, I really appreciate that connection to procurement, because I'm hoping that our procurement professionals with us here are thinking about this in two different contexts. How do I apply what I'm hearing as the experiences in Pittsburgh and also in Brownsville to procurement itself? Like, as a procurement function, what data do we want? And I really appreciate the conversation we've already had in the chat, and we're going to continue some of it offline about what are those meaningful measures. What should procurement be measuring based on what our stakeholders need from us, not always just what we think is important to measure, but also putting on the hat to your example, Chris, of being the support function for all the different functions in government, and thinking about, as you both just discussed, what are the data elements and data requirements and the deliverable requirements with every single solicitation I'm managing, whether I'm buying vehicles, whether I'm buying an HR system, whether I'm buying consulting services. Everything we do in contracting has some type of deliverable or some type of data. So I really appreciate touching upon the requirements and the solicitation that ultimately are going to be part of the contract administration monitoring that both the department and its procurement partner are going to be doing. So I think that's a really important piece that you were both discussing that I wanted to highlight for the procurement folks. So I think we have another question. Al, you want to tee up your next question?
Yes, absolutely. What examples do you have of how you currently leverage data in your role? So looking forward to seeing what folks have in the Zoom chat, and we'll also respond. And in the meantime, we're so excited to as well dig down with Damien on the work of the city of Brownsville. And so you all are aware, it speaks to some of the last points that both Marquita and Chris were talking about, which is outcomes. And so for us, Damien has been an exemplar example of thinking about, in a way, what are the outcomes that procurement as a function can strategically deliver for the entity that are aligned to its priorities. We're going to hear about the first quote program, which is empowering to its local suppliers, and then how they are defining some metrics of change to help deliver some of those agency priorities. And it goes back to when each of us look at our roles, is when you figure out, well, what matters to, not just the role, but to the outcome that Marquita talked about, and establishing a KPI and a system of delivery, and then hopefully a routine, and then to use dashboards, and also we'll talk about some of the data in terms of standards. So Brooke Smith, Brooke, we're huge fans of yours. So on all things AI, and so we're so excited to hear your question. It helps me justify future needs and decisions made. For example, staffing needs, tech needs, cost savings we are producing, and value we are adding to the organizations. Absolutely, that's a great point.
Mm-hmm. And then we also had from before some of the areas that people said they are struggling in. So it might be an opportunity, right? We want to think about those aspirational takeaway opportunities that we hope you further the dialogue after this conversation with all of us, and go back to your organizations and say, here are the things that I want to do. Here are some examples that entities are doing. So you build your network of resources amongst the people who are responding to this, and in your other VCon sessions. So definitely make note of who's doing some things already, and reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain about how I can mirror this in my own organization. So thank you all for responding to these questions.
Yes, and there is a theme here on the lack of reports in the procurement side. I know Anna Foley talks about there are many reports in the accounting side, but they don't reflect the info that is important to procurement. And there was another one about fragmentation of data, or everything for us is so manual. There's no database for procurement. So all of these challenges we hear time and time again across the profession, across different entities. And don't, in a way, see, I know the city of Pittsburgh, of course, they have a data function to actually address some of those problems. But one of the takeaways, and we'll go into Damien's example very shortly, is don't be afraid to take a file and start your analysis. Start your analysis, and then think about stakeholders on what matters to them, and have that discussion around that specific data set, why it matters to your function, your piece, in a way, and in a way translate that bridge and create the safety. And so that is important. And back to also Chris's example on leadership buy-in. That's usually also, of course, important across an organization, to make sure that there is that full buy-in, and a coalition, in a way, of the willing to try and make sure that not only can you capture and collect the data, standardize it, but deliver the outcome. So I just wanted to mention that that's a theme that seems to be coming across from the audience, and we hope that one of today's takeaways is on that piece.
And let me just also, as we move into now hearing about Damien and all the great stuff happening in Brownsville, just don't forget, procurement professionals, to look at all of your areas in your strategic plan. And if you don't have a department strategic plan specific to procurement, looking at the organization's strategic plan, because that should also be telling as to what data is important. And I really liked, Pam, thank you for your comment about engaging small business. So now we're tapping into data that's meaningful from our supplier and contracting community, who are our stakeholders. So this just isn't just siloed within the organization and what the organization wants, but what all the stakeholders, your political stakeholders. So look to those groups to help you define what is important to the community, what is important to the entity, because that should be driving you to particular data to help support those efforts.
Such an important point from Marquita, and I think that speaks to as well exactly Damien's work, and Damien will speak to his vision in a way. And when we heard about his vision and mission of exactly what that is, engaging local businesses, driving that fabric in terms of the community, how that elevated procurement to have those discussions at the management and also even city council level for everyone to align on that is an important piece, and then to have interdepartmental and departmental buy-in across the board because of, goes back to earlier Chris's point, as in figure out why it matters. Like, what is the most important, in a way, metric that's meaningful, movable, measurable, that folks can align around. There is a framework called the 3M framework that we will also share with you that can help support some of that conversation. Damien, over to you to speak about the City of Brownsville, your vision, mission of the program. We know it's early days, but we're so excited about the innovation and the culture change that you are already embarking on.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yes, I mean, the data itself, and you mentioned earlier, data and procurement are best buddies. We sometimes are afraid of how much data is out there that we don't know how to put it all together and share it with people, right? Like, we don't have an idea what we even want to share, what's a priority, right? So I think in our case, we basically had to step back and first said, what are our priorities that we want to share with everybody? What's lacking? What's slow? I think anybody that works in procurement has always heard the typical, well, procurement is just another road on the block. They're slowing down things. They want to, put more and more items. And sometimes it's something that you should take a look back and say, hey, maybe we need to do a better job at explaining why we sometimes ask for items, why we need this stuff, right? And I think that one of the key items that they kept mentioning was that, hey, there's slow procurement cycles. The turnaround time for some POs or items is, taking a long time. So that basically led us to start looking at the problem itself, what was going on. We internally and within the departments, we started to standardize items, standardize some processes, standardize documentation so that we could, start to get that flow. But what we also acknowledged and we identified was not just internally, but our external clients, we call them, or our vendors, right? We started to see that they struggle with information as far as like what to supply to the city. The stigma that they had was like, doing business with the city is hard. There's a lot of stuff that they need to come up with. There's a lot of items, documents that they need to supply. And once you have like that one-on-one conversation with them, they start to notice and figure out like, oh, wait, this isn't so bad, right? This is not as scary as it's made out to see. So one of the things that we started to implement here at the City of Brownsville was said, okay, how do we, first of all, increase the procurement cycle, the turnaround time for POs, and then secondly, increase that engagement with our local business suppliers, right? We want to make sure that we engage with our local business suppliers and that they keep doing business with the city. Our city is experiencing at the moment tremendous growth. So we want to make sure that we also invite those vendors to be part of that growth, right? And one of the items that we identified was there wasn't truly, we do have our current system where we enroll our vendors, but that's it. It only captures information. It doesn't engage with the vendors. It doesn't communicate anything else. So what I wanted was a system that would capture the information and also allow us to engage with the businesses. And that way we can always, get that information real, and it would be turn around to us fast enough. If we were to tell them, I need you to submit the following through that platform, capture it through there, and have that shared to our departments, that would be ideal. So that's what we basically did, and we're hoping to do it. Let me rephrase that. We're working through the implementation of this first quote program, where we're going to have suppliers enroll in that platform, share all the significant certifications that they might have, such as Bed Hub status or woman-owned, anything that we might deem as significant as far as SB certification goes. Get them to upload that info there, and then share that information and share that with our internal department so that they can engage with the suppliers through there. Essentially, for the lack of a better word, almost creating our own internal marketplace so that they could get the quotes from there. That is going to help us, one, stay compliant with ensuring that they engage with local business suppliers as well. And then two, that's going to create the procurement cycle, because if the department is able to join that platform, look at the vendor list that we have available, request quotes from there, they should in turn get that information faster and get back to us and say, hey, procurement, I did my due diligence, everything has been vetted out, here's a quote, I need a PO. So it's almost a win-win for both. Internally, procurement cycles are getting a little bit faster, they accelerate. And then secondly, we are engaging with our local businesses, while also the goal is to maintain information with that platform to them, being able to ensure them that, hey, this is the information that you need to submit, and hopefully also have them up to date. Because sometimes what we find, to your point out earlier, is that the data that we have is outdated. If you don't have a dedicated person there that is updating that information, you have outdated info. So that information is null at that point. So what we want is that platform to help us come up with updated data every time. We have that communication with the vendors and making sure you create that. I like the word earlier that you mentioned, that is, you create that psychological safe zone for them of like, oh, I can work with the city. There's no, it's not scary. It's not like you're clear with the communication that you have out there. There's transparency around the whole process. And then secondly, you can then now put KPIs and put goals for your entity to start measuring. We're coming up with this platform. What's going to be the goal? Is it going to be increased local business awards? Then yeah, let's go ahead and what's that goal? And you have to set realistic goals for your entity, right? And it's going to depend on every entity, but set realistic goals for your entity and work to achieve them, right? And I think that that's going to be the goal now. It's going to be like, okay, we have this platform for our local businesses. Let's see if we can increase the local business engagement.
That's excellent. And Damien, this also ties with Chris and Marquita's points, which are in terms of having a plan, like having, in a way, a vision. Without data, it's meaningless because there is, in a way, no measurement of success. And so where you define that problem, it goes back to what Chris talked about in terms of the challenge, and then align people around it and figure out those KPIs and integrate that into your flow, where then everyone comes to be aligned around that outcome, is mobilizing for every entity. And also, I would say that each individual, not just on the panel, but each individual on this call, you're all at NIGP VCon, data can be empowering and is empowering to you to, in a way, deliver on those visions. And so it's not that don't shy away from getting started, you got to hopefully deliver those amazing outcomes and utilize data. And so, Damien, we applaud you for all of the work that you're doing. It's super exciting, and that culture change management and that leadership in Brownsville is great to see. Marquita, over to you.
Oh, and I agree, and I really like the engagement of the supplier and contracting community, and really focusing on what's in it for everybody, right? Because all of your stakeholders are like, yes, they might be interested and supportive of something procurement's focused on, but at the end of the day, they want to know what's in it for me. Why should I care? And so I really like that aspect of inclusivity. One of the challenges that we heard from on the chat conversation and we've discussed is data in different places and silos and different people owning that. And how did you manage through, Damien, kind of that data governance angle of we don't control the universe from procurement, so how do we get to success in these situations? And also would welcome Chris sharing his perspective on that and his organization as well.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I think that the fragmented data, it's out there. There's a lot of tools that we have, so many platforms that we use, and specifically in our city, for example, at least procurement-wise, we are decentralized. Decentralized procurement is neat in a way, but it also comes with its challenges, right? There's a lot of uniqueness that every department comes out with. So what we started doing is identifying how to centralize all those platforms, all that data that is coming forward, right? There's so much innovation that is happening in the tech world that we want to make sure that we don't just jump in at new stuff. We want to make sure that we actually analyze what we need and then go from there. So what we started doing is collaborating with every department as far as, data that is being collected, and how can we then share with whoever we need to share with it, that either be senior leadership, with the citizens. How do we centralize all this info and then translate it to good, accurate, transparent data for everybody to have? So it's been neat to see how that collaboration efforts are happening throughout the city, and we breaking down silos. We don't see it as oh, it's their problem, they'll deal with it. No, we see it as an actual, hey, it's our problem, we need to deal with this. It's a matter of collaborating with them and taking accountability and taking ownership as well, and being sure that that problem that they have, you're also part of it. So we gotta work together. So the short end of things is basically centralizing all that data so that you can then come up with proper procedures to say, how do we govern all of this, right? And how do we ensure that this is being looked at? To your point, sometimes I've seen always, at least in my entity, and I'm speaking on behalf of mine, where we create all these procedures, or we create all this items, but there's no cross-department collaboration, where if that individual or that set of individuals are, were to retire or leave the city, there goes that procedure with them. Nobody else is following that, and that, it stays there. And who knows, somebody is doing it the same thing. It's like, why are we doing it this way? It's like, oh, well, that's the way that we've done it before. It's like, do we need to keep doing it this way? It's a lot of those items that we started to basically assess and come up with, and saying, hey, do we actually need to continue this road, or can we do it in a different way? And it's been pretty neat. And then just as a final point, if you all don't mind, back to the problem that we came up with, at least, or that we identified, it also aligned with our entity's priorities. One of my entity's priorities was making sure that we engage and we keep that connection with the local businesses. Make sure that they're not left out of all of this. Make sure that we keep, happening, because all the innovation might be happening on the formal procurement side of things, but the informal side of things is where you might be, leaving some of that information out. So they basically said, make sure that you're still engaging with our local businesses. So that's how we aligned as well with this problem as well, and said, hey, this is a solution that might help, both the community and our management, with that problem that they have.
Excellent. Chris, anything you want to share on your end?
Yeah, I have also the pleasure of chairing our data governance committee at the City of Pittsburgh, which presents itself with sort of the challenges of trying to help folks in each of our departments speak data too, right? And they do, right? But trying to harmonize kind of what we're looking for in terms of knowing more about our data and being able to communicate about it, so that as Damien is talking about, like, when you find a reason to be looking together at data, that you can have kind of shared conversations and shared perspectives on it. That often ultimately ends up resulting in my team getting involved and to help, retrieve data from some system and bring it into a place so everybody can look at it. But I'm kind of reminded in Damien's comments about how valuable it is to, be careful about what the business processes are, and make sure that, people are communicating about them and documenting whatever they are. Performance engineers, right, we're kind of convening some senior leaders this week to talk about the value of documenting standard work, so that when people do win the lottery and they move on, then that they are able to kind of get into the place where they can hand documentation off, or the new person who comes in can be trained on whatever is, whatever documentation is being created. And that's a knowledge management idea, right? How do we, retain the knowledge from the organization, for the organization, so that it can be passed from team member to team member. And we try to think about that knowledge management in data governance too.
That's excellent. And it sounds like there's this change management, the knowledge management, and also drilling down on the technical side, interoperability of tooling is so critical. And I see a lot of comments in the chat on platform data, maybe disconnected, fragmented. And this is a day and age for entities to, in a way, demand from suppliers that there is an interoperability in their platforms is so critical, because if platforms cannot speak to each other, if data cannot be pulled in an easy way, in a way, it becomes cumbersome. You end up having siloed systems. And I don't know, Chris, if you have any further insights onto that, how you think about, importance of interoperability in different systems.
Well, I can say in a very brief statement that it sure makes our lives easier when it happens, right? And if we don't, what we end up doing is committing lots of very skilled labor to, retrieving data and making it interoperable. A great non-procurement example is that we track property in the city of Pittsburgh with parcel information, right? And this system has a parcel number that has dots in it, and this one has hyphens in it, and then this other one has places where there are extra zeros added as leading zeros on a value. And so, it requires our team to standardize it if we're going to communicate that out to increase interoperability. And so that all happens as work, right? Once we automate it, sure, it's all happening, but it takes all of that work to make it happen. And that comes at the cost of being able to do something else. So if a system is more interoperable with another system, or, so maybe one of those systems is a little older than the other, right? But as you're thinking about replacing that system on technology modernization, sort of, thinking about the standardization that you do, right, between that, so that, data can more easily talk to each other through the different systems that you have.
Excellent. And Sue's comment, yeah, sorry, Marquita, go.
No, I was just going to mention to connect that to a procurement example. Think about the similar types of data that are managed from different perspectives. Procurement has contractors, and we have contracts, and there's information that we capture on the contracts relative to the spend. And this actually came up as a question earlier in the chat. Then you have the end user, the fire department, the water department, and they have records of the supplier and contractor's name and their tracking of spend. And so as you think about something as important as spend analytics, where there are often a lot of challenges, is because of that disparate and inconsistency in inconsistent structure that is not in place, and everybody's just tracking information the way that they want. So to your point, Chris, if there was a meeting of the minds and an expectation set through what is awesome, if you have a data governance structure, right? So hopefully one easy takeaway from everybody is go back and ask, what is the data governance structure in our organization? And that might inspire someone to go, the what? I guess I better start thinking of that. Or yes, we have one, and procurement has to be a part of that so that we are part of ensuring that consistency and enabling that interoperability.
That's wonderful. And it goes to Kimberly's point in the chat, which is they have a business analyst in their department that composes the data leadership. And that role and responsibility within departments, within an organization, to Marquita's point, in terms of data governance, there's a data model that needs to be set up where folks speak to apples and compare pears to pears rather than anything else, to Chris's earlier point. But roles and responsibilities, data models need to sit somewhere in an organization. And Damien also pointed out, and I think resonated by Chris as well, is process. Process on the business side, SOPs, documentation, that all ties into the data governance. That can then, in a way, drive insights and actions with amazing tooling and AI. And I would just put it out there, and I think Brooke, who's the queen of AI on the procurement side, we know that, is on the call. Without good data standards and good governance, it goes back to that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. No one will be able to use great cutting edge tools without good data standards. And so I think that goes to first principles.
Yep. And Al, we want to hear from you about some real world examples and those AI tools. And if we queue up, there it is. This is something for you all to chime in on. And then we're going to have Al go ahead and dive into those examples. But let's talk about that. Hey, what would we like to do? And I'll even ask Damien and Chris to respond in the chat while Al's sharing of what's next for you. What's that next great strategy or opportunity that you see with data that your organization is considering pursuing? And for those of you in our audience, what opportunities do you think would improve your operations? While you're answering that, Al, talk to it. Let's get to the real world and the AI opportunities.
Absolutely. And so for us, in terms of where AI is going on a number of fronts, and we all see this, it's a very fast-moving space that started up with really innovation probably since I would say if we step back, like the big innovations in human history, from the steam engine before, like as in the wheel and the fire, etc. We are at this in a way on the humanity in terms of a new frontier on AI, agentic AI, and then this point where actually AI is potentially gonna outsmart us. And the question to us, all of us as professionals, is how do we utilize these tools to empower and to do good in the world? And for us, we're seeing that especially in procurement, which is such an important function day in, day out, which is really the interface between any government, school district, education, etc., entity with the community, with its suppliers. It is the interface, right? And so for you all to start utilizing AI across the spectrum of spend analysis, so understanding where potentially money is going, vendors, which contracts they're going to unlock opportunities. We're seeing that now, people utilizing AI, and I think Damien can speak to some of the examples that he had done, not just on the spend analysis, but actually on more on the evaluation side, utilizing some great AI and innovative tooling at the city of Brownsville already. And then also in supplier performance management, tracking delivery times, quality metrics, responsiveness, previously done by different tooling across a spectrum on the city side. And now we're seeing folks utilizing cutting edge AI to actually identify anomalies. Risk assessment, we've heard some great examples of actually AI being able to model out now even what will happen in terms of later this year based on the different exogenous shocks on the supply chain, where we all see some of the geopolitical considerations that are happening both globally, but also, of course, in the US, and how that will impact budgets in terms of predictions, how that will impact supply chains, how that will impact residents. And for entities to be prepared, and there's going to be potentially pressure on procurement and purchasing to deliver further efficiencies. And where are those efficiencies going to be garnered? Damien, I know, has been proactively thinking about some of those pieces even before any of those shocks that he can speak to, and actually using procurement as a strategic lever for empowering the entity not only save and using different tooling, but actually potentially even generate revenue for the entity. And then finally, we also have heard a lot of evidence on specific examples of fraud detection through actually machine learning, some great sophisticated tooling out there that we'd be happy to share offline post this, but on entities figuring out supplier fraud and saving at times millions of dollars on that function. So technology can absolutely be used for good. I'm biased, I'm a techno optimist, so you're all aware. But to Markita's point, I would say back to the conversations with Chris and Damien and Markita, it's not about just data nerdship or technology nerdship, using these toolings to deliver both your strategic and visions of both you as professionals and empowered professionals to deliver for your entities now in a way is an opportunity, because there are some great tools out there. Chris, Damien, over to you on some specific examples and what's exciting you, what's been exciting for you in the space, to Markita's earlier question as well.
Yeah, so an applied example of stuff that we're working on right now, where, like many cities, Pittsburgh is working on trying to improve permitting processes. And so the way that my data shop has been tapped is to improve the reporting on permitting processes so that we can know, like, put eyes together the same way we were trying to put eyes together on safety and say, hey, are we all looking at the same thing? Is it making, permits faster, processing faster, or is it not? What are those interventions working or not? And so that's something that we're doing. And then eventually we want to report that out, just like some of our peer cities do, right, about how effective processing is. We're working on separately. We're working particularly in the technology department about starting the RFP scopes of work off with goals. If we don't know what we're trying to change, then, and we're not articulating it, we don't know if the procurement's succeeding or not, right? And so that's something that I'm trying to bring into this practice a little bit. And then I also hope, like I said, I want to procure this data governance solution. I want to improve the observability of data in the city. And so we're doing that with some internal stuff, but we're also looking to get an RFP on the street in the near future.
Excellent.
I
Damien?
don't want to copy a lot of what Chris just eloquently said, but we are looking basically to, at the City of Brownsville, is looking at the data that we have, centralizing it, seeing what's actually useful from that data, what do we actually have to put together, and then from there you can also identify where you're getting actually inaccurate or outdated data and work on improving that. But then ultimately the goal is that we can then share that data with our residents, information that actually matters to them, from construction projects. Like, hey, a lot of our calls that we get here over the city is a lot of the construction that is happening around the city itself. So what we want to hopefully in the near future do is be able to share information specifically to those construction projects that are outgoing, right? Where they can just type in perhaps an address and see if it's going to be affected or not. But anything from the permit side of things, it's always a struggle with the permit procedures, right? And it's always seeing questions about it. What we want to hopefully do is also centralize the information that we get from permits and then perhaps turn it around so that we can have individuals or citizens, residents, be able to ask questions and either an AI or a chat box is able to respond to those, but not just with the typical like, oh, type one, no, like actual AI is there trying to answer those questions that we feed the information to. But again, we go back to how crucial it is that that information that you feed it is updated, is the most up-to-date information, because if not, you're going to be feeding it outdated info. So it's a couple of things that we're working on over here at the City of Brownsville. We're hopeful that the residents see the benefit of all that information that we're trying to share with them.
Excellent. Well, the residents in both of your cities are very fortunate that you have very forward-thinking organizations. And at the end of the day, that's what is most important, is doing things that support and earn the trust of our communities that we work in. We only have a few more minutes of time. And so, Al, we'll just share this question for purposes of those who are willing to share in the chat. You've heard some examples from Damien and Chris, but also if your organization is doing something really innovative in leveraging AI and data, drop a note. Again, you're going to be an inspiration to others who probably want to learn about that and connect with you. So we invite you to answer this question in the chat while we close out, and then give opportunity for any final questions and any closing thoughts from the panel. But just briefly want to mention things that you've already heard about. Where do I get started? Don't try to swallow the whole elephant all at once, right? You got to start small and grow. And hopefully you've identified one idea or one comment that really resonated or might really connect with something your organization's talking about right now, something that's urgent and important for your community. And so you heard about kind of first creating that culture and that open environment of conversation and collaboration, and building that cross-functional. And this goes for everything that we work on in procurement. We have to engage our stakeholders and the people who are a part of the things that we're working on. And that certainly applies to this conversation about data. And just so important, and hopefully has been very inspiring for you, as it has been for me, hearing about that data governance structure and starting that conversation. You may be going, I have no idea what the answer to that question is, Marquita. Great. That's your assignment. Go back, find the right person in your organization and ask the question and start learning. And then you also heard everyone touch upon that change management and training and bringing everyone along into this effort because everyone has to be involved. So just want to open it up to question either in the chat or jump on mic and ask the question for our brilliant panel here. And as we pause for a moment to see if there's any questions, I'll also ask for a closing thought from Damien, Chris, and Al, as we have about 5 minutes. So thank you all for sharing already some examples of AI opportunities. And I'll keep an eye out for a question or keep an ear open for someone jumping on mic. But closing thoughts, start with Damien. Closing thoughts from you, Damien?
No, I mean, I think that this is always a good opportunity to learn from other cities. It's been a pleasure to look at what they put in the chat. It makes you feel that you're not going alone through this. There's a lot of people that go through all this struggles, right? And it's good to have a forum where you could share and hopefully learn from what other cities are doing. So definitely, it's been a pleasure talking about this. And I'm even though we're small sample, I'm pretty sure that later on we can get other cities to also start thinking about the innovation and because you usually don't look at procurement as being the innovator of things, right? You're always more compliance and let's do this. And I think that right now, one of the priorities, at least for what I've seen from leadership in the procurement roles, has been the innovative portion of things. How can we start to put that in our key thing of priorities, at least for procurement goals? And it's been good to share that with you all.
Excellent. And we have about 2 minutes and got to leave a little moment for Charles. Thank you, Damien. Small but mighty, Damien. Small but mighty. And Chris?
Yeah, just know that the folks working with you in the procurement department, or if you are the procurement department, right, that your opportunity to lead the change kind of comes from the knowledge of doing your work. You can see the places where you're running into trouble, and you can raise them to try to help solve problems in those places. And that we gave you a couple of examples around how that worked for us, and we'll still be out there learning and looking for those ways in the future. It was great to have a chance to share with you all today and to learn from you when you've shared some information, and thank you all for having us.
Hey, thank you. Last 30 seconds, Al. Final words.
Just purpose, community, collaboration, right? And utilize data and technology. I think this for us is the takeaway from this talk, and really utilize the community. NIGP, it is a community to lean on that's heartfelt, and folks are in this together. Damien, Chris, myself, Marquita, we are also a resource to you. So feel free to reach out with any questions. We always hope that, feel that there's open doors here in terms of conversation. That's all on my side. Back to you, Marquita.
Absolutely. Thank you, Al, Damien, Chris. Very inspiring information. And thank you so much for sharing your stories. Greatly appreciate your time. And thank you to everybody who invested your hour and 15 minutes with us.